CJ Flyer back with the fire in another YouTube video. Today going over the top 3 worst mistakes you could possibly be making when purchasing support staff in College Football 27 Dynasty Mode. Mistake number 1, purchasing the wrong support staff as a small school. Now, I'm not going to say from who or where I've been seeing this advice, but I've been seeing some really bad advice spread around the internet regarding support staff that you should be looking at as a small school. I've been seeing a recommendation to purchase the bronze recruiting hours increase. Now, while a 10% boost in your recruiting hours sounds nice on the surface, you have to be looking at from the perspective of a small school in which you are only starting with a couple hundred or so hours. So for example, as a 0-star school, you start with 200 base recruiting hours during the regular season. So a 10% boost to that would give you an additional 20 recruiting hours. And for me, that's just really not moving the needle enough to make it worthwhile. You can't even purchase friends and family with an additional 20 recruiting hours. Even looking as high up as a 1.5-star school or a 2-star school, you're looking at an extra 30 to 35 recruiting hours during the regular season, and an additional 50 to 55 recruiting hours during the portal. Now, I will say, if you have a 2-star school or higher and it's your second or third support staff that you're looking at purchasing, then sure, go for it. But if it's the only support staff that you can afford with your NIL budget, I highly suggest not getting this purchase. It is not worth it as a sole support staff purchase. I've also seen some advice going around the internet about purchasing the off-season progression increase as a small school at the bronze level. Now, the bronze tier for the off-season progression increase staff gets you a 5% boost for all players of all position groups during the off-season training. And yes, this is the same progression increase that you can get by purchasing Motivator Tier 3 for all position groups. However, as a small school that is looking to advance to be able to compete with the power conference schools, a 5% off-season training boost to a roster that is subpar at best is not going to move the needle much to make you competitive against those bigger schools. I stand by what I said in my small school rebuild method video. The first support staff that you should ever consider as a small school is the fundraising support staff, which gives you that dynasty point increase during the end of season recap. And the reason for this is because as a small school, you really should not be allocating much, if any, dynasty points to any in-season equipment and to any high school recruits. You should be saving that for the roster NIL and for portal players. Because as I've said in videos in the past, the transfer portal players are going to improve your roster significantly more and quicker than you will by getting high school recruits as a small school. And so the nice thing, once again, about that fundraising support staff, since that dynasty point increase comes at the end of season recap, which happens before the transfer portal, you get an additional surplus of dynasty points that you can use for the transfer portal players, which in turn could help you get an additional 1 or 2 85+ overall players to have on your roster going into next season. Which, of course, with a 5% offseason progression boost, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get a player, or at least you're very unlikely to get any of your existing players on your beginning roster as a small school to a higher overall, compared to if you just use those extra points to snag an additional 1 or 2 players off of the transfer portal. Now, purchasing the support staff that reduces NIL expectations as a smaller school could also be a great way to benefit your team, to be able to benefit your budget, but it's only going to be beneficial if you have a certain amount of dynasty points allocated to your recruiting and roster NIL. And that leads me to the second mistake: purchasing support staff that lose you dynasty points. That's right, even though on the surface it might appear that there are support staff that you are purchasing that are benefiting you, there's actually some support staff that if you purchase it is going to harm your budget and cost you additional dynasty points, compared to if you just hadn't purchased that support staff at all. So for example, looking at the bronze tier for reducing NIL expectations, we can see that the support staff costs 150 dynasty points and gives us a 10% reduction in NIL expectations. Now, just doing some quick math, if we spend less than 1,500 dynasty points on roster and recruiting NIL by the next preseason, we've come out at a net loss, because 1,500 dynasty points, 10% of that is 150, which is the cost of the reduced NIL expectation support staff at the bronze tier. So for example, if we assume that we're going to end up spending about 1,000 dynasty points on recruiting and roster NIL leading into next preseason, well then our benefit in purchasing this support staff is only going to be 100 dynasty points, which is less than the cost of the support staff itself. So if you take the benefit minus the cost, we got 100 minus 150, and you actually ended up losing 50 Dynasty points by purchasing this support staff. Now, this is not the only support staff that can result in a net loss of Dynasty points. The other support staff I'm referring to is the support staff discount support staff. Depending on which tier you get, you might actually be increasing the number of Dynasty points that you're spending, especially as a 2-star school. Now, obviously, it goes without saying, as a 0 or 1-star school, if you're purchasing support staff discount support staff as your only support staff, well, that's a complete waste of Dynasty points because it's discounting nothing. I mean, the support staff is purchased to discount the other support staff that you have on your team. But yes, again, as a 2-star or 3-star school, you could also come out at a net loss depending on which of the support staff tiers of the discount support staff you purchase. Thankfully, you don't have to do any of the complicated math for this one. You can go ahead and have the game calculate for yourself whether you're coming out at a net gain or a net loss from purchasing different tiers of support staff discount support staff. What you'll do with each of the tiers is you can go ahead, hover over them in the menu, you see the cost on the right, go ahead and click to select that support staff, and then there'll be a pop-up that appears that tells you what refund you're going to get for purchasing that support staff discount support staff. If the refund amount is more than the cost, then of course you'd come out a net gain, and if the refund amount is less than the cost of purchasing that support staff discount support staff, then obviously you just don't want to touch it. Don't purchase that support staff. And all of this discussion on support staff discount support staff leads me into the third mistake in this video, which is assuming that higher tiers of support staff are the better option than purchasing the lower tiers. You can see as I'm going through the different tiers of support staff discount support staff that the highest one is not even necessarily the best option. In fact, the best tier of support staff discount support staff that we can purchase for this Penn State program with this arrangement of support staff is the silver tier. And the reason for this is pretty simple. Basically, the cost of the lower bronze tier support staff all the way up to the platinum level does not scale linearly with the bonuses associated with them. And what do I mean by that? Well, we can see that the bronze tier of support staff discount support staff costs 100 Dynasty points and is a 15% discount. And knowing that the silver tier is a 30% discount, we would assume that perhaps, as you scale it up from 15% discount to 30% discount, that the cost would also double. It would go from 100 to 200, but in fact, it goes from 100 to 250. This same logic can apply to other support staff as well, such as the reduce NIL expectation support staff. Although with this one, it's really going to depend how many Dynasty points you plan to allocate to recruiting and roster NIL in a given season. So let's say, for example, you plan on spending 2,000 Dynasty points in the upcoming season on recruiting and roster NIL. Well, then the bronze tier of reduce NIL expectation support staff is going to be better than the silver tier or more, because with the silver tier, in order to break even, you have to be spending approximately 3,333 Dynasty points on NIL. And with the gold and platinum tiers, you need to spend at least 5,000 Dynasty points for each of them in order to break even there as well. But thankfully, as stated before, with the bronze tier of reduce NIL expectations, you only need to spend 1,500 Dynasty points to break even. So when you plan to spend 2,000 before the support staff boost is applied, well then hey, this is actually going to be beneficial to me. Now, I've had some requests in the comments to put together a support staff strategy guide. However, I thought it was crucial to share the worst mistakes first before going into some of the best practices. If that is a video that you'd like me to put together, please let me know in the comments down below. And of course, if you have any questions about these mistakes, also leave a comment and click one of the videos on your screen now for another College Football 27 Dynasty tutorial.